responsibility of data. I mean, you guys are all taking the step here. You're taking responsibility for your own city. Like, we have to get people to understand that the notion of ethics, civic responsibility, those types of things. That's my number one thing. You know, like if we, and I'm guilty of this. Like, I built, you know, people say don't go build another photo sharing app. I did, right? And it didn't do so well. but I spent time doing that, and you know what? And I feel a hell of a lot better every day doing the work that I get to do now. And I'd love for people to know, like, when we train people, they shouldn't just be looking at, you know, hey, let me try to figure out some analysis on some system, or let me try to figure out how to, you know, do something very narrow with data. You know, the classic one is just, the joke is Jeff Hammerbacher, who's, I guess both of us get credit for coining the term data scientist. You know, he had a thing that said, you know, the best minds of our generation are going to figuring out how to click on ads more. Now, Jeff Hammerbacher works as a research scientist at Cedars-Sinai on cancer. What we have to figure out is, how do we make the benefits of this technology work for everyone, for all of America? Just like as we're saying, people talking about, hey, let's do all this cool things that we can do in healthcare with the mobile devices. Well, how do we make sure that works for everyone? So that's really, really critical. So when we were talking about this role, we came up with a mission. We really use that to stress test things. And when we really came down to it and started talking about using the mission to actually have conversation about what's most important, what we realized was we needed a mission statement that really defined what is going to be the long-term arc of this role. And especially when you're the first person in the role, your job is to make sure there's a second. I mean, that's how you know you define success. And the big component of it there was to responsibly unleash the power of data for the benefit of all Americans. And there's kind of a couple words that are important there. Responsibly. What does responsibly mean? What is that supposed to be? And then the other part is for all of America. It's all Americans. And a lot of times when you think about this data, whose data is this? It's our data. It's our data together. So we should be able to use that data and transform it into something more effective. And that's, in fact, what we call data-driven government. We've spent a lot of time talking about what a data-driven organization is, and we've seen companies massively benefit from that transformation. I mean, astonishing in how much benefit they've done, not just for themselves, but for overall American competitiveness. So how do we take some of those lessons and apply it back to ourselves, especially at the community organizing level, like nonprofits, the whole thing? And one of those things, the definitions that we say is a data-driven organization, you collect data, or a data-driven government, you collect data, you do it in a responsible way, and then what you use that data for, you open it back up to the public. So the public can do a few things, as well as internally you can do a few things. You can iterate and combine it with other data sets to figure out how to make efficiencies. You can take those data sets and figure out how to build new products, things that people hadn't thought of before, gain insights, wisdom. And you're doing it for a very specific reason, bettering society and providing security. And security is a social fabric. And one of the things that's really important here that I don't think we really have gotten our handle around is we're really good about talking about the cracks in our social fabric and how people fall in those cracks. And you guys as community actors, you guys know this better than anyone else. I mean, but what happens when you have latency between a database? That's a digital crack that somebody's falling in between. Latency meaning one database updates another database, but it does it really slowly. Maybe it waits till the next day, and somebody's, food stamps, somebody's deportation status, something's stuck in the middle there, just because the computer system didn't get updated. That is a new type of digital crack. That type of crack in our social fabric can't be obviously seen because it's sitting inside code. And it's not always obvious because it's just slow. Access to information is a digital crack. Not having access to this updated information. Talking about things about like, hey, where are those neighborhoods? Where are the neighborhoods that have a notion of things that can't really be fully captured in a typical data set? How do we discover that? How do we start having that conversation? Like, what does that even mean? Like, the people who are going to figure this out is not going to be some data scientists sitting back in the back room. It's going to be you guys combined directly. And to convince you, like, you know, we're trying some of these really different things now. So one of the things the president just announced in Camden, New Jersey, is what we call the Police Data Initiative. And this was started in Washington as part of the 21st Century Police Task Force. But it wasn't started by something where the president said, hey, you know what, guys, I think you guys should really have a police data initiative. Because, like, all good things come up that way, right? No. What happened was 2 presidential innovation fellows, these are people who apply to come back into the government and spend time in agency. They're in Department of Energy, Clarence Wedwell and Denise Ross. And they paired up with a former person in the Chief Technology Office, and Lynn Overman. She's a former federal prosecutor, used to be at the Department of Justice also. And they said, you know what, we got to do something about this. This is insane. And technology should do something. So they started calling police chiefs. Said, hey, would you be willing to come to the White House and spend some time with us? And I didn't know they were using my name to say that I was going to send the invitations later, but well played by them. and there's one secret thing that the White House can only do really one thing. Is like if you call somebody, they pick up your phone. that's like the White House secret power. And so they all said they wanted to show up. And so we got 21 different police chiefs to come to town with data scientists, technologists, community organizers. We got them in a room. So you got the dress blues, you got the hoodies, you got everything going on. And you know, it's a little awkward meeting because it's a very tough, hard, sensitive project and concept. Like, what would you open up? How can we have transparency? If we really believe consistency is transparency over time, how are you going to give us data to show us that we have that consistency? What can be done? How are you going to make sure that we feel comfortable with these things? And you know, one of the most important lessons that we took, which is a lesson that you guys know, it comes from you guys, is instead of having a no conversation, we said we're going to have a how conversation. And then we're going to decide whether we should or shouldn't do this. Let's figure out the lines afterwards. Because after we start going through that, we start having the how conversation, we're like, you know what, that's not that bad. Maybe that's okay. And as a result, we've got now 24 cities and more joining that have committed to opening up over 101 data sets that had not been accessible before. And some of the things that we've also seen, and thanks to Code for America doing this, is realizing, you know what, the police chiefs actually have a real problem. It's technology. They have vendor solutions and they need help. They need help to get the data out of these systems so that they can give it up. Even if they want to provide this data, they don't know how to provide it. It's not like you just say, click save and then say export. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that easily. So they're struggling with that. And here is the most screwed up thing. Here's literally the most screwed up thing. Some of these solutions want to charge you $90,000 to get the data out. What's $90,000? That's a playground. That's a playground in your community. That is unacceptable for data that the citizens own. That is what we mean when we say to unleash the data. We have to take that data back and give it back to the community so you can see it. So we're starting on our way. We're nowhere done. We want to get going there. Same thing with electronic medical records. One of the things we're also focused on is precision medicine. This is the idea of we can sequence genome, we got all these medical records. How do we bring all that data together? How do we bring it together so that we're going to see the next generation of insights? How are we going to make sure that we, the level of, we see this with cancer, that we have very specific treatments that are now designed. How do we make sure that's true? And most importantly, how do we make sure it's true for every American? Because right now we have an incredible, let's just call a spade. We have incredible distribution issues with with access to healthcare. The third area that we're focused on is open data, my data. One of the things about what does my data mean? Well, why can't you just access your birth certificate? Like, why not? Why can't you access your school records easily? I mean, you can get all this other stuff easily. And you think about that for a second. Like, most people are like, well, I already keep mine. I got mine. Yeah, you ever talk to a foster kid?
That's right.
Like, they need this all the time. This is every day. Even the military kids moving around, if they don't keep all those records together, it's a real pain. You're in a disaster. House burns down. The city floods. I mean, we have climate change. You don't need my anger management version of me. Like, it's true. The president says, like, he's not a scientist, but he knows some scientists. Yeah, so I'm a weather scientist. That's what my career was based on, is meteorology. So it's happening. So we're talking about how do we bring climate data and health data together. But you're in that disaster situation, why should you have to wait in line? We got a mobile phone anyway. Shouldn't you be able to go get access to your data without going to 15 different departments to get your own stuff? Like, this is not sort of super theoretical thing. This is, government is supposed to work for you. Right? We got to figure out how to make that happen. So we've been putting a team together, and we have that team, people like Jason Goldman, who's coming in from Twitter and Medium. He's now the Chief Digital Officer for the US. Evan Cook just joined from Twilio. He's a co-founder over there, and Twilio is the equivalent to the second largest carrier now. They touch 95% of all phones in America, apparently. So when we talk about APIs, we go, hey, just ask Evan. He kind of knows. We have Ed Felton. Ed is the guy who showed that the online, all the electronic voting records could be hacked, and showed that you need to really do a lot different job of securing them. And he's been very outspoken on encryption issues. And so when you think about it, if you're going to have to deal with encryption issues, who's the best person in the world? It's Ed. Yeah, people are like, DJ, what do you think? I'm like, go ask Ed. That's the world's best. So we're very committed to doing that. And part of that is to make sure that we're able to empower those that are in the government to take on these challenges, because many of the best are already in there. They are in these roles. We just have to give them an avenue to do what they want to do. They want to build the right system. They want to do these things. And part of this is, we're starting to figure this out at the city level as well, and the state level, but we need to do so much more at the local level. And this is why what you guys are doing today is so important, because these problems, and like one of the things we're talking about is like, what would be a city SDK, software development, like the question of like, how do you have this templates for the data and all these different things. We shouldn't have to reinvent it every city to city. We have thousands of cities. Every single one of them is an experiment in technology. It's an experiment in policies. We need to figure out is how do we use all those experiments of what's working and what's not and share that information to each other. And then just take the best of that. When we just start adopting that across each other, we'll have our modern day barn raising. And that's what we call when we say innovation nation. Let's really take that innovation nation and start empowering ourselves. That's a big thing to us. The other one is how do we get more data DNA into the entire federal system as well as society. There's no reason that as we're training people, we shouldn't give them increased data skills, knowing that there's such a demand. A lot of people don't know, I started my career in community college because I didn't do very well in math in high school. Not doing well is probably an overstatement. First year of school, suspended, kicked out of my math class and read my rights the first year. And luckily, community college turned it around for me. That's why I'm such a strong supporter of the president's vision on community college. So how do we get data training in the community colleges? What's that mean? How do we get that analytics capacity, those skills? If we really believe that we're about to embark on an innovation nation, then we got to get those skills to everybody. Like, we cannot allow this to be separate technologies, separate systems, a class based on technologies. That is not who we are as Americans. And then there's something that Secretary of Defense Ash Carter says that I think is really important, is as a country, we are best when we engage directly in the hard dialogue. And he has a whole bunch of case studies to kind of show like what happens when we really engage and when we don't. But we always end up on the right side of the equation when we're willing to engage directly in the hard dialogue. And I think technology is one of those forms where we literally come together and make that happen. I could go on and on about this because this stuff is so, I think it's just so important to the stuff that we do. I'm just glad that I was able to get my travel approved to come out here. You'd think it'd be like just pressing a button. We're getting there. David Recordin from Facebook is now running IT for the White House and making a game changer, making our tools and systems better. But happy to talk about anything. Product design, some of the stuff we're seeing, police data initiative, precision medicine, whatever is most useful to you guys, but you guys are the all-stars.
Any questions?
Yeah, just shout them out.
I'm not quite familiar with the police data initiative is.
So the police data initiative is the idea that we said, so separation between federal and state issues, right? So we can't say, like, hey, you guys all have to give data this way, or this is a standard. So what we're doing is we're bringing 24 of the most progressive police chief and jurisdictions together to start opening up data and start sharing it in a common place so everyone can start looking at it, to hope to evolve to a set of standards that we say, hey, this is what looks right, as well as starting to share technologies that will help get the data out of these systems into a unified environment, a place where they can share it. We have 5, 6 maybe, data scientists from University of Chicago, Data Science for Good group, that are going to go actually in to work with police commissioners and start studying that. We're going to start looking at a lot of the questions around body cameras from a technological perspective, because one of the ones that people don't always realize is, you know, under extreme budget pressure, how do we think about how do you deploy these technologies? Because it is terabytes of data, it's not petabytes of data yet, but the cost of just storing that data is, you know, for a bootstrapped police department is extremely tough to make trade-offs there. And we really think about it for the data for 3 groups. First is a citizen. That is number 1. That's the number 1 person we're thinking about it. Number 2, the police chief. Sorry, not the officer, the actual officer, the person who's actually on the line. You know, because equally, you know, you think about data, it's like, well, why aren't we giving them data to know if they're subjective bias or just, you know, they're just not seeing the bias? Why aren't we giving them back the data to increase training, give them feedback? You know, like, why is it in a video game you get so many detailed feedbacks about your statistics? Like, right, you might play like an Xbox game, and you got like Halo, and you're like, look, here's your hit rate, and here's all the, it's like all this thing, you talk to a kid, and they're like, oh yes, here's how we think about the statistics. You're like, wait, what about real life? So why don't we give that feedback about how you're doing and performing that same way? How do we start using data to inform an officer what is really going on in the neighborhood? Make the type of place where they're going to go. Let's give them an advantage to help use data to help them police. And then also the police chief and the mayor, because we know they're under extraordinary budget pressure. So how do we take that data and start using it for that for them? On the body cameras, there's a ton of other stuff because there's privacy issues. You know, a kid who just happens to be being, you know, on the side of the street and you can see their full image. We don't know how to automatically blur out something like that. We just don't know how to do it technically yet. So a lot of questions there. A lot of good, a lot of challenges. And this is one where we're going to bring a lot of people together and try to figure it out.
So for the citizen,
It's been focusing much more on that, and that is spanning much more across Europe. Is how that's been taking off. And now it's getting centralized. Sort of that idea is getting more localized into each places. I don't know about Ireland specifically, but
sometimes we offer grants or subsidies for people to invest money for like developing a product and get it to market. I was wondering, like, say, as an Irish student who come here to develop a product,
yep.
What is the best way to do that in terms of resources and the capital?
Right. So the classic there's kind of a few funding mechanisms to get things moving. The one that's the most overlooked is Small Business Administration. It's like the SBIRs, the Small Business Innovative Research Grants. Those type of things are kind of, there's like a very structured format for those in the different areas. There's a granting agencies. If it's more like R&D, you would go to NIH or Commerce or NSF, National Science Foundation, those type of groups. And then there's venture. And the venture groups have a whole kind of model that is private sector where that's happening. And then there's actually a lot that's actually happening by smaller side from like 501c3s like Arnold Foundation and groups like that, where we're seeing other things. Those are kind of the best ones. There's not kind of a clear one where you can say, oh great, I got that, and now there's a pipe to test things. But the good thing about tech is you can build something and try it and start getting it out there really low cost nowadays. Yeah. I also don't want to steal like all your time today too. You guys are actually doing the more important work.
This is like perfect because you get to do my homework. I'm working with a group at Google called the Black Tech Mecca, and essentially what we want to do is diversify STEM by creating a culture that makes it exciting, incorporating aspects of fashion, art, entertainment, things that the kids are actually naturally into, and then show them the work behind it and do workforce development as a carrot stick. We were inspired by the Becoming a Man program that Barack touted and the Office of Civic Innovation. The issue is our data set where we can show that these programs have the specific amount of influence necessary to actually get the bodies in the chairs. Because people have the offices, they have the computers, they're willing to do the code, we just can't get the kids excited.
Yeah.
But we already know the entertainment people can get them excited, but we have to be able to quantify and show it through some sort of index, and you're the perfect person to help me do my homework. So when I walk in the office on Monday, I can say I asked you.
All right. Wow. That will get me in trouble. So the Office of Civic Innovation, David Wilkinson, who's running that team over in the Domestic Policy Council, is outstanding. You know, here's one of the like what you're describing is this fall off gap between how do we get people excited about stuff, and then figure out like what does that mean to the job transition, so like they're actually learning stuff. One of the best places where we're doing this right now is there's actually two. One is mathematics. Like if you go to some of these mathematics fairs, like people are playing these games and they're doing some very sophisticated math and they have no idea. And then you have this kind of classic thing is the parents like, do your math homework, and it's like the exact like worst form of like trying to get somebody excited about math. You're like, it's like all stick, no carrot. It's like the worst form of it. And so we have to figure out how to make it fun. The Hour of Code has done a really great job of kind of combining with things like Frozen and you know, showing like how you can make coding fun. We're seeing a lot more of that. I mean, Minecraft has been amazing. For anybody who has a kid like Minecraft, you're just like, whoa. It's like getting between a lion and food. It's like getting between like a kid into Minecraft. It's like, you don't want to be stuck there. And so like, how do we do that but make it more relevant? Like Khan Academy is a good experiment there too. The measurement function is something that I think we have to be extremely careful with and dogmatic about. Because one, we've had this typical like, there's no way to measure it, so we don't try.
Right.
But that can't be an answer. But we also know that so much of this can't be captured. So how do we kind of create a good kind of model? I think the only way that we're going to do it is by creating lots and lots of tests and just trying one thing after another. Some of it's going to be some performance-based type things, like how you're doing. Some of it's just going to be some kind of cleverness kind of type, you know, problems, like how did you do over here? How did you do over here? These type things. When I teach math, one of the things I'm looking for is not your ability to execute on the problem. I'm looking at, so can you see something more unique? So like with a 4-year-old, I'm interested if they're trying to copy a pattern, do they realize that they can actually create symmetry? Like can they use, like by folding the piece of paper, could they get the answer more quickly than like, oh, well I'm gonna do this n different times. Like I'm looking for that kind of, I want the students to get that kind of grasp. Now how do you measure that? I don't think we know. I think there's a lot of hypotheses. Now, one thing I want to make sure that we don't lose that you did mention is the arts, because I think we have you know, this whole kind of question of putting things like music below the line when it's like the first thing you cut. But how do we make sure that it's cool to do music and math and all these things as cool as to do sports? Like look at what Glee. Suddenly like being part of the Glee club is like cool and sexy. Like that's not what it was like when I was there. And so like how do we get like people to realize like yeah, that's a good thing to be doing. And how do we bring like we should fundamentally figure out how does a day of a school day doesn't feel like chunk to chunk to chunk to chunk. It should feel like I went to school and I learned. Now did I learn about music or math? Does it matter? Did I learn about chemistry or physics? Does it matter? I learned. Yeah, because last time I checked, I didn't get like a problem where I'm like, hey, you know what? You need to go solve this problem. So I'm like, so is this a chemistry problem? Or is this a reading lit problem? No, it's a problem. So I would love us to get more to that type of stuff.